Lewis.
Present.
Marmorato.
Present.
Marte.
Present.
Mealy.
Present.
Menon.
Here.
Moya.
Here.
Narcisse.
Present.
Nurse. Osei.
Present.
Palladino.
Present.
Powers.
Here.
Wrestler.
Here.
Riley.
Present.
Rivera.
Present.
Salam.
Present.
Salamanca.
Present.
Sanchez.
Presente.
Shulman.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Ung.
Present.
Vernikoff.
Present.
Williams.
I'm here.
Juan.
Present.
Yeager.
Here.
Zhuang.
Here.
Borelli.
Present.
Farias.
Present.
Speaker Adams.
Present.
Invocation.
None.
Adoption of minutes.
None.
Messages and papers from the mayor.
None.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
None.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
None.
Thank you. We will now have communication from Speaker Adrian Adams.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader, and good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the passing of my friend and former council member Paul Vallone. Paul served in this legislative body from 2014 to 2021, and he continued his public service as Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Veterans Services over the past 2 years. Paul stood here in these chambers with me as I was sworn in just a few weeks ago to start this session. He was a beloved colleague and a well-respected leader in Queens and New York City. His contributions have benefited countless New Yorkers and will continue to have an impact for generations. Most importantly, Paul was kind-hearted, compassionate, and caring, and we will never forget him. My thoughts and prayers are with his wife, his beautiful children, and the entire Vallone family during this difficult time. I want to thank the Democratic members of the New York congressional delegation who sent the council a letter reaffirming their unanimous support to end solitary confinement. House Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries, Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Congressman Gregory Meeks, Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, Congresswoman Grace Meng, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congressman Jamal Bowman, Congressman Jerry Nadler, Congressman Richie Torres, and Congressman Dan Goldman. Thank you very much for your unrelenting work to secure justice for all New Yorkers. Now I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the families of those who have been killed by the NYPD, who recently sent the mayor and the council a letter in support of the How Many Stops Act. Gwen Carr, mother of Eric Garner, Katiatu Diallo, mother of Amadou Diallo, Valerie Bell, mother of Sean Bell, Iris Baez, mother of Anthony Baez, Mercy Baez, cousin of Anthony Baez, Sammy Felice, brother of Alan Felice, Gladys Williams, stepmother of Antonio Williams, Sean Williams, father of Antonio Williams, Constance Malcolm, mother of Ramarley Graham, Ellen Trawick, mother of Kowalski Trawick. Ricky Trawick, father of Kowalski Trawick. Angie Hicks, aunt of Chantel Davis. Hortensia Peterson, aunt of Akai Gurley. Hawa Ba, mother of Muhammad Ba. Natasha Duncan, sister of Chantel Davis. Victoria Davis, sister of Delron Small. Carol Gray, mother of Kamani Gray. Margarita Rosario, mother of Anthony Rosario and aunt of Hilton Vega. Our communities are safer because of their work, their courage, and decades-long struggle for justice, not despite their pain, but because of it. It's what brought us to this moment of progress. I thank you all for your work to improve police transparency and accountability for all New Yorkers. For some of us in this room, and for New Yorkers across the city, the killing of Black and Latino people in our own communities at the hands of police officers who are supposed to protect us have become flashpoints in our lives. These are moments when we remember exactly where we were, who we were with, and how we felt when we heard about the death of one of our own neighbors. For me and my community in Southeast Queens, it was certainly the killing of Sean Bell, not too far from where I live and the district I now represent. It's been nearly 2 decades since Sean's life was taken from his family, his friends, his loved ones, but the impact of his killing still reverberates throughout our community. He was killed the night before his wedding in a hail of 50 shots by officers. Sean's killing was a reminder to Black fathers, brothers, mothers, and grandmothers about the risks we still face, even in moments of joy that others may take for granted, like the night before a wedding. That is the history we must always seek to change. The How Many Stops Act is a part of these efforts. Like communities throughout the city, in Southeast Queens, we respect our local precincts and police officers. We've worked so hard to forge stronger relationships because that is important to public safety. But we need greater transparency and accountability because that will only help us build upon the community trust we've developed, which is a prerequisite to building safe communities. In honor of Sean Bell and the many other families who have lost loved ones, we must advance this legislation forward. Today, the council will be voting to override the mayor's vetoes of Introduction 586A of the How Many Stops Act and Introduction 549A to ban solitary confinement in city jails. Public safety is a collective effort, but it can only be achieved when there is transparency and accountability in policing. Transparency fosters the community trust that is necessary to make our neighborhoods safer. Intro 586 of the How Many Stops Act came out of the 2013 Floyd versus City of New York federal court decision that found the NYPD's use of social workers who were stopped and city council members. The court-appointed federal monitor in that decision recently found 1 of every 4 stops made by the mayor's reconstituted police unit was unconstitutional, and that Black and Latino New Yorkers make up 97% of those stops, despite being approximately half of the city's population. I want us to sit with those numbers because they tell us something very important. They tell us that we have work to do when Black and Latino New Yorkers are disproportionately targeted by police stops, and many are unconstitutional and underreported. But because of the gaps in reporting by the NYPD, the public is kept from seeing the full picture. It's the same lack of data that allowed stop and frisk to worsen years ago, which did not become clear until the public had the data. That is why the council advanced the How Many Stops Act, to address the lack of transparency in these investigative police stops. The need for basic transparency is clear, Black and Latino New Yorkers continue to be disproportionately subjected to unconstitutional stops that go underreported. Civilian complaints of misconduct are at their highest levels in a decade. These stops can no longer happen in the shadows because the pain and trauma they inflict on communities have long-lasting impacts. Solitary confinement is globally recognized as torture. The isolation of solitary confinement by any name has been proven to cause physical, psychological, and emotional harm, and its use has contributed to continued violence and deaths on Rikers Island. Here in New York City, solitary confinement is almost exclusively inflicted on Black and Latino people who are awaiting their day in court and don't have the money to avoid pretrial detention. Introduction 549A will improve safety for staff and those detained while allowing the Department of Correction to separate people for safety purposes. This bill has been crafted with the input of stakeholders, including corrections experts, impacted families, and the labor unions that represent many workers in the city's jails. The humanitarian crisis on Rikers Island cannot continue, and we must no longer rely on failed policies that maintain the status quo. It is imperative that city jails are made safer for people who are detained and for the staff who work there. We must meet this moment with moral clarity and a commitment to progress because that is how we move forward as a city. Our focus on police transparency and the rejection of inhumane practices that exacerbate violence are important steps that advance safety. Both bills were passed by this body with a veto-proof majority because we believe that all New Yorkers deserve transparency and safety. For these reasons and many more, I look forward to our overriding the mayor's vetoes and working together to successfully implement these laws that will make our communities and cities safer for all. I now recognize Public Advocate Jumani Williams for comments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership on this and the entire council. Thank you, Council Members Alexa Vilas, Colleen Rivera, Crystal Hudson, all the chairs. Thank you to the families in particular who turned their pain to purpose. I want to just also thank the advocates and my staff, including Jeffrey Severe, Solomon Acevedo, Nick Smith, Elizabeth Guzman, Gwen Safran, entire policy team, and a special shout out to Veronica Avies and Rosie Mendez, who really took this on their back for many years. I also want to just thank Dr. Tracy Keese, former NYPD Deputy Commissioner, Zachary Carter, former counsel, and Lieutenant Edwin Rabin, who added their voice in support of How Many Stops Act recently. This always weighs very, very heavily on me. I think people don't realize how heavy, as I try to make sure I'm striking the right balance. I was concerned many, many times about the Community Safety Act and all the things that were being said then, and we were proven correct after many years, and I believe we will be proven correct again. I do want to, just in case folks haven't seen an example of what we have been asking people to do, Madam Speaker, you appear to be a Black woman between the ages of 20 and 65. This is a level 1 stop. From a 911 call, it did not raise to another level stop. However many seconds that took, that is the information we are asking. I assume will be even quicker once the drop-down menus are there and once people are used to it. This does not have to be done at the moment of a stop. Police officers do not have to stop what they're doing. If it doesn't make sense to do so, there's also the opportunity to do it at the end of the tour when they are already tagging videos. Unfortunately, there's been so much information about paperwork and officers not being able to do their job. There is much fear in the city, and there's much concern with police officers who are hearing they have to do so much additional work. Finally, I think yesterday I started hearing the administration say they will begin to have a conversation about implementation, the conversation that many of us have been trying to do for such a long time, and I'm looking forward to that conversation because its information is needed and is necessary. We also worked off the patrol guide to make sure we can put it in a way that is already the framework that exists when it comes to dealing with the last vestiges of solitary confinement, and using isolation as a way to change behavior that has not been changing behavior and has been causing more harm. We want to make sure that we are doing what's best for the safety of people on Rikers on both sides of those aisles. We have lost 2 detainees already this year, and it is not even February. We know the long-standing effects of using isolation that is not working and causing harm. We want to make sure that that stops. I also want to lift up the concerns I heard of correction officers who I know are also in the room, many of whom are working there with cell doors that don't lock, bathrooms that are not working, black women who are being sexually assaulted. It is not a safe place for anyone to be right now. This bill would not fix everything that goes on Rikers Island. It is to address one concern that people have been talking about for many, many, many years. It creates another housing unit that we can use to separate people and try to address the behavior. It is well thought out. I am also looking forward to the implementation of how we're going to do what we must do. So thank you again to everyone. I also want to just give a shout out to former Councilmember Danny Drum, who worked so hard on this, and I also want to say rest in peace to Paul Vallone. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Advocate. I will just make a little bit of an adjustment to the way that you began your remarks. Madam Speaker, you look like someone who appears to be between 25 and 25 and a half. I think that is what you meant. Thank you, Public Advocate.
Thank you. My deepest and sincerest apologies.
Thank you so much. I now turn it back over to our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. We will now move into discussion of general orders. And I'd like to call on my colleague, Councilmember Kalman Yeager.
Thank you. We're still here. Sorry about that. Not going to reiterate the entirety of what I said earlier. And obviously, as I recognize and I have a clock on me, I'm not going to make a motion, but I just do want to note for the record, as I've discussed earlier at the previous stated, Section 42 of the Charter requires that at least 36 hours prior to a meeting of the council has to publish and make publicly available a proposed agenda for a meeting. That's not a notice that a meeting is going to happen. That's actually a proposed agenda. We do it all the time. It looks a little bit like this. We get it in our inboxes. In this occasion, and for the previous stated, we did not receive that. It's different from the email that was sent out at 4:50 p.m. on Friday. That was a notice that a meeting's happening. That's the same notice that goes to the press, to anybody else who signs up for our list. That's different from a proposed agenda. In this case, that agenda did not occur. It was not sent out. I don't know if it was prepared or not, but it was not here. The rules of the council don't supersede the charter's provision. The charter itself has this language, and it's there for a reason. It's so that the council doesn't do things like this, set up meetings, not tell the world, even though we knew what was going to be on the agenda, but we have rules for a reason. One of the rules we have is that there's a proposed agenda. Let the world know what it is we're going to be doing in a formalized way, and that was not done. And for that reason, I do move that the matters on today's agenda be laid aside and that a notice be properly made to the members of council and to the public, and that we reconvene at such later time as the speaker determines when the speaker reconvenes the meeting. Thank you very much. Oh, in addition, since I have the floor, and why not, let's not do this again, to the extent that my motion is denied, as I expect it will be, I move to separate the questions on the general orders calendar and to decouple them. Thank you.
Councilmember Yeager, can you please state your point of order and the amendments you're making?
Thank you, Madam President. The point of order is that as a matter of order, we are required to have an agenda, a proposed agenda, published, made publicly available, that's the words of the charter, a proposed agenda for the meeting. This is a stated meeting, it's not a special meeting, and that was not done at this meeting, that was not done at the prior meeting. And I know that the discussions on the dais earlier focused around the question of whether or not an email sent out at approximately 4:50 Friday constituted an agenda. But that's not an agenda, that's simply a meeting notice. It's just let everybody know block off some time on your schedule. Tuesday, come on down to City Hall. We're going to have some fun. That's not what an agenda is. An agenda, as we have always done it, looks like this. It shows up on your inbox. It's strictly a day or two before stated. For this stated and for the one held earlier this morning, such a document did not arrive. The only document that
Sorry,
arrived on
Councilman
anything.
Yeager,
Yes, ma'am.
can you pause for a minute?
Sure. Thank you, madam. Madam President, I can provide additional clarity if it seems to be unclear. I see this in
Not needed,
conversation.
please hold.
Okay.
Thank you. Your motion is not well taken. Sorry, point of order. Your motion is not well taken. The charter requires that a proposed agenda be posted. A proposed agenda was posted on Friday, as mentioned prior. There's no requirement that a proposed agenda contain all items to be considered. We will, Further, Section 42 of the charter provides that such proposed agenda be published as soon as practical. Your point of order, again, is not well taken. What motions do you propose?
Well, I rose for a point of order. The point of order was for the items on the agenda. It wasn't a motion. The point of order was for the items on the agenda to be stricken as they were not properly noticed in a proposed agenda, and there was no proposed agenda for this meeting posted. There was simply a notice that a meeting was happening. In other words, it didn't even have that there would be an invocation or that there would be a roll call or an adoption of minutes. It didn't have any of the things that we typically have. I know this may sound esoteric to those who are not familiar with council process, but those who are.
Councilmember
know that
Yeager,
we
you are
get-
conflating a point of order right now.
Yes.
We need to know what the motion on the floor is.
It's not a motion. I'm rising for a point of order regarding the order of the agenda of the
Point of
council.
order is not well taken.
Okay, very good.
Do you have a motion?
My motion is that the items on today's agenda be stricken from the calendar, as the calendar is not properly done in accordance with the charter of the City of New York, and thus we should not be meeting until such time as an agenda or a proposed agenda is sent out 36 hours prior to the meeting.
That is not a valid motion.
Sorry, Madam President, it's not a valid motion to propose that matters that are on the agenda be stricken from the calendar? Sorry, let me use the words laid aside.
Lay the motion.
Hearing-
Items on the table, a motion voting. Will allow us to move forward.
There's a motion on the floor to lay the items on the agenda on the table. And you want- There's a motion to lay the items on the agenda on the table. Clerk, can you call a roll call vote? Okay, folks. There was a motion on the floor from Councilmember Yeager to lay the items on the table. And a vote is to lay the items aside. A no vote is to proceed with the general order calendar. We can now call for a roll call vote.
Abreu,
No.
Ariola,
Aye.
Aviles,
No.
Ayala,
No.
Banks,
No.
Botcher,
No.
Brennan,
Nope.
Brewer,
No.
Brooks Powers,
Nope.
Caban,
No.
Carr,
Aye.
De La Rosa,
No.
Dinowitz,
No.
Feliz,
No.
Gennaro,
No.
Gutierrez,
No.
Hanif,
Nope.
Hanks,
No.
Holden,
Aye.
Hudson,
No.
Joseph,
No.
Krishnan,
No.
Lee,
No.
Lewis,
No.
Marmarato,
Aye.
Marte,
No.
Mealy,
No.
Menon,
No.
Moya.
No.
Thank you. Narcisse,
No.
Nurse, Jose,
No.
Palladino,
Aye.
Powers,
No.
Wrestler,
No.
Riley,
No.
Rivera,
No.
Salam,
No.
Salamanca.
No.
Thank you. Sanchez,
No.
Schulman,
No.
Stevens,
Nope.
Ong,
No.
Vernikov,
Yes.
Williams,
No.
Juan,
No.
Yeager,
Aye.
Zhuang,
Aye.
Borelli, Farias,
No.
Speaker Adams.
No.
The motion is defeated with 9 in the affirmative, 42 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. Councilmember Yeager.
Madam President, I request pursuant to Rule 9.6 of the Rules of the Council that the general orders calendar be decoupled and that each matter be voted on separately today.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor to decouple Intro 549A and Intro 586A as separate questions. All those in favor say aye. All those not in favor say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? The ayes have it.
The nays have it.
The nays have it. Thanks, y'all. The nays have it.
Madam President, how you doing? I rise for... We get paid for a full day here. Madam President, I rise for a point of parliamentary inquiry. Thank you, Mr. Parliamentarian. How you doing? In the past, in this body, we have never, to my knowledge, 6 years and 28 days here, we have never subjected a request under Rule Point 9.6 to a vote. That is a request that is privileged. It's a request when made by a member has to be abided by, and it has always been abided by without a vote.
We'll be holding 1 second. Thank you. Rule 9.60 allows a member to make a request. It is not debatable pursuant to Rule 9.190. The request is denied by the body. Report of special committees.
None.
Reports of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Criminal Justice, Intro 549A, solitary confinement.
Coupled on general orders.
M12, Mayor's veto message.
Coupled to be filed.
Report of the Committee on Public Safety, Intro 586A, How Many Stops Act.
Coupled on general ordered.
M13, Mayor's veto message.
Coupled to be filed. M13. I would now ask that a clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Abreu.
Are we voting for real now? I vote aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. Ariola.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Overriding the mayor's veto and allowing intros 586A and 549A to pass will make this city and our correctional facilities less safe. I've spoken with numerous current and retired members of law enforcement about this subject, and the response was virtually all of them have been the same. Intro 586 will needlessly tie down our already overstretched police department, and Intro 549 will remove one of the last remaining tools that our corrections officers have to enforce rules within their facilities. Both of these things equate to less safety. Less safety for the average New Yorker on the street, less safety for our corrections officers and staff, and less safety from other inmates who can now be attacked at will with no repercussions or too low of a repercussion available to deter their assailants. I'm proudly voting no on this override, and I implore my colleagues in the City Council to do the same. The public safety of our entire city is at risk, and right now, this is an opportunity to prevent unnecessary injury or loss of life, losses which could be easily avoided if we vote down this override and allow our law enforcement to do their jobs as effectively as they possibly can. Thank you for the time. I vote no.
Aviles.
I vote aye. Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
I'm proud to have co-primed Intro 586A, a component of the How Many Stops Act aimed to deliver more transparency to our communities. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Speaker Adams for holding firm in her commitment to not only passing this legislation, but now delivering this veto. I want to also acknowledge the families who have lost loved ones to police violence, who have worked tirelessly to get this legislation passed, but again, to assert their commitment to justice by standing with all of us today as we override this veto. Another round of thank yous goes to those who have turned their publicly lived trauma into concerted effort for reform and accountability. This legislation we are talking about today is a baseline level of transparency that New Yorkers deserve, quite frankly, from any city agency. This veto will be for every person who has had an unlawful encounter that took away some of their dignity, for every young person, especially young Black men, who are consistently made to feel like a suspect rather than a scholar, for every person who experienced violence and harm for stops that were never recorded, for all of those who lost their life. My sincere hope is that this veto will move us closer to ending the need for the dreadful talk, where families of color have to have with their children to save their lives. Racially biased and unlawful stops are an ongoing problem that we must address with intentionality. I can't understand why the mayor and the NYPD does not want to do this work. The mayor should be focused on ensuring NYPD follows the law, just like every other agency, and should be focused on the enormous scale of misconduct lawsuits and rising complaints. True public safety includes putting an end to solitary, an end to discriminatory and unconstitutional policing. Thank you.
Ayala.
I vote aye.
Banks.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Dr. King once said, life begins to end when we become silent on things that matter. and I'm asking my colleagues to summon the courage of Dr. King and not be silent. How many stops? How many stops, Mr. Mayor? How many times will you stop or attempt to stop and obstruct the council? How many times? Well, summon the courage of Dr. King, summon the courage of Malcolm X, speak truth to power, and let's get on with the people's business. This is a body, a co-equal branch of government, and I think, and I know for sure, that the folks that sent me to represent them from the 42nd Councilmanic District didn't send me here to be silent. So I refuse to be silent. I'm standing up for transparency, I'm standing up for accountability, and I'm voting to override this mayor.
Botcher.
Aye or no?
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Aye.
Brooks. Powers.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
For the last several weeks, I've witnessed unfortunate spreading of disinformation around two bills. And I asked the question, why? Why would we want to continue to divide communities in a time when we must be united? I represent District 31, which I always say represents the best of New York City, which is its diversity. We have Black, brown, Asian, we have one of the most vibrant Jewish communities, and we live side by side. The language that continues to be portrayed in the media has been wildly inaccurate. This past weekend, I joined my colleague, Councilmember Williams, for a ride-along in the 105th Precinct, where I got to spend time with my commanding officer and our foot patrol and other officers. And a lot of what's been shared is just not true. There is no paperwork. The only paperwork that's being filled out is when there's an arrest. The officers fill out each night reports either on their phones or on the computer. Each night when they are about to get off, they go into the precinct and they tag their device. Most officers turn on their device at a level 1 because they do not know if it's going to escalate to a level 2 or 3. That means this information is already being tagged. We want to work with the administration to implement this as seamlessly as possible because the police officers are the ones protecting our community. Many of them are our brothers and our sisters, and we know them too. We cannot continue to alienate this council, this body, with our community. And so we have to do better. And with that, I vote aye on these pieces of legislation to override the veto. Thank you.
Caban.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. First off, I just want to shout out and give flowers to the Jails Action Coalition, who has worked for over a decade to get this work done. I want to honor all those who have suffered in solitary confinement in New York City jails, or who live in fear that a low-level police stop may quickly escalate to extreme danger. These conditions are oppressive and inhumane, and they make all New Yorkers less safe. To all those who have fought to win these vital protections, I vote to override these vetoes in your honor. A todos aquellos que han luchado para obtener estas protecciones vitales, voto en su honor. Second, let me say that the mayor's disrespect for this council and our speaker is shameful. He vetoes our legislation, and then when we override his veto, he simply refuses to meet his obligation to implement the law. He pretends to negotiate budget restorations and then unilaterally imposes new cuts. He has proven that he cannot be trusted. This city deserves so much better. El alcalde, puedo confiar en él. Nuestra ciudad merece mucho mejor. And lastly, I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, public advocate. I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, public advocate, daunted fortitude in the face of such disrespect. New York will be a safer, more just city because of what we are doing here today. So thank you, and I proudly vote aye on all.
Carr.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'll be opposing the overrides today because I believe that the enactment of these two bills will have the effect of making the uniform and non-uniform personnel of some of our agencies, as well as members of the public, less safe. The bill with respect to punitive segregation is mistaken because there's only so many options that our corrections officers and staff have to maintain order and discipline in a city jail. Unlike our police, who, when they address a problem, have the ability to take someone out of that situation and bring them to a jail to await punishment and trial, that option has already been utilized by those who are in the jail awaiting trial. And so having punitive segregation is an important disciplinary tool to ensure that we have order in our city jails. And that is why I'm opposing this particular piece of legislation. And with respect to Intro 586A, I think we've come a long way since I first came here to this body as a staffer in 2014. At that time, progressive leaders of this body were pushing for civilianization of positions in the NYPD in order to get our uniformed personnel off of desks, out of desks, and out of the precincts and into the streets doing real police work. And now we seem to be undoing that good work by placing an undue administrative burden on our officers that will be taking their attention away from their jobs and creating a perverse incentive not to engage in the basic encounters that further investigations, which makes all of us less safe. And so for those reasons, I'm opposing both of these bills today, and I vote no on all. Thank you.
De La Rosa.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Madam Speaker and our colleagues, our public advocate, for their brave leadership today. I want to say a few words in Spanish because I think it is important as we highlight the diversity of our city that our communities understand what is at stake today. El 97% de las detenciones realizadas por la nueva unidad de la Policía de Nueva York, constituida por este alcalde, fueron personas negras o latinas. Una de cada 4 detenciones son consideradas inconstitucionales. Una y otra vez somos testigos de neoyorquinos negros y latinos que son objeto de un sistema discriminatorio. Una comunidad como la mía, hay un largo historial de brutalidad. Desde las protestas de Washington Heights en el 1992, exigiendo justicia después de que un oficial mató a un inmigrante dominicano, José Kiko García, hasta el 2019, cuando mi constituyente, Allen Feliz, fue dejado a morir de manera inhumana y sin dignidad en las calles después de recibir un disparo durante una parada en su vehículo, hemos estado exigiendo cambios. Hoy ese trabajo continúa. With agencies given that much power, taxpayer funding and responsibility, we hold them to a higher standard and should be able to hold them accountable when necessary, not to weaken the checks and balances built to ensure that our city runs smoothly. This is not the first time in our city's history that the police have been vehemently against accountability measures. But accountability measures are far overdue for those sworn to protect all New Yorkers. The way we build stronger ties is by bringing sunlight and transparency, which is what we will do here today. On solitary, I simply want to say that I am proud to vote to ban on solitary confinement. I was proud to vote as a member of the state legislature to undo this torture in state jails, and today I am proud to vote in honor of those who have lost their lives in our New York City jails. Torture, by any other name, is still torture. And evoking Dr. King, we all know that the time is always right to do the right thing, and the time is now. I vote aye.
Dinowitz.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. You know, our job as council members is to provide oversight of all of our city agencies, and that includes the NYPD. And transparency is one of the tools we have to do that. I'll be honest, when I first heard about this bill, I was very concerned about administrative burdens. Then I read the bill. And then I read the NYPD patrol guide, and I spoke with our officers. Our officers, right now, without the bill, are already going back to their stations after their tours, docking their body-worn camera footage, and tagging level 1 and 2 encounters. And in many cases, they are logging the apparent race and gender of the people they encounter. This work is already being done. But for reasons you heard earlier, it is critical that we get this information. And for the most part, this bill asks for information that is already being recorded. But I am sympathetic to any concerns about administrative burden. I went on the mayor's ride-along this Saturday night, and the officers were sharing with us all of the paperwork they had to do. And one of the officers said, in some instances we fill out 2, 3 documents for a single incident. And in those documents are duplicative information. In some instances, they're writing by hand information, then going back to the station and transcribing those handwritten notes to a computer. One officer shared with me that as recently as 2012, he was using a typewriter. And for those of you who don't know what a typewriter is, just Google it. The point is, I think all of us, or myself especially, want to make sure our officers are on the street doing the work that they signed up to do, and that is to keep us safe, to prevent crime, to fight crime, to solve crime, not back at the station doing paperwork. This bill does not significantly add to their administrative tasks, but if we want to take that seriously, if the administration took seriously the administrative tasks, they should conduct an audit, and we should all as a council take that seriously and work together, this bill or any of the other paperwork they do, to ensure it's as streamlined as possible so that they're on the streets keeping us safe. I vote aye on both bills.
Feliz.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I vote aye on the override. As a young Latino from the Bronx, I know very well the importance of police transparency and accountability. As a young Latino from the Bronx, who was a teenager growing up on Fordham Road in the Bronx during the Bloomberg era, I know the importance of police transparency and accountability. At the same time, I know very well, as a representative of District 15 in the Central Bronx, the important role that police officers play in helping improve public safety. Public safety is obviously very complex. It requires many different pieces, putting them together the correct way, including, and obviously, opportunity, good schools, and etc. But in the Bronx, I've seen these police precincts, these police officers play a very important role on the issue of public safety and deterring crime, and of course deterring harm, so that if our youth do want to take advantage of opportunity, for example, playing in a local park, playing baseball, basketball, football, so they could do so without having to worry about other people coming to harm them, as we've seen far too often in the borough of the Bronx and in the city of New York. So I vote aye on the override. Police officers play a very important role in public safety, but of course, transparency and accountability is crucial. So I vote aye, but I hope we could take a hard look at how the bill is implemented to make sure that it is properly implemented, to make sure there are no unintended consequences. Thank you. I vote aye on the override.
Gennaro.
Madam Leader, I wish to speak on my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Speaker and the Council leadership for working with people all across the political spectrum and engaging moderates like me in order to make common sense clarifications, common sense modifications to make sure the bill was that both bills were fair. So I certainly appreciate that. I appreciate the public advocate for engaging me personally. Had a lot of conversation with Rosie Mendez also, and I appreciate the collaboration and the outreach to moderates in the council, and with that, I vote aye.
Gutierrez.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Hoy, una vez más, estoy muy orgullosa de la mayoría de mis colegas, concejal Avilés, de la portavoz Adams, de nuestro defensor público Williams y de los activistas que continúan presentándose para animar a los amigos y familiares que han sido detenidos, atacados y deshumanizados injustamente. Estas historias no son dramatizaciones, ellas son verdaderas. Realmente destruyen a las familias y cambian nuestras comunidades para siempre. Nos debemos de preguntar por qué esta administración no quiere proteger a cada neoyorquino. ¿Qué revelarán los informes sobre los encuentros de investigación sobre una institución quebrada? La verdad que muchos de nosotros, especialmente los afroamericanos y latinos, ya sabemos muy bien que un sistema que invierte más fácilmente en vías hacia el encarcelamiento y violencia que en lugar de vivienda, acceso a alimentos y servicios de salud mental es un sistema que nos falla a todos. Y si no te sientes motivado a prohibir el régimen de aislamiento porque no conoce a una persona que haya tenido esta experiencia o porque crees que es un mito o porque cree que alguien se lo merece, ni un solo sobreviviente ha salido del aislamiento y ha mejorado sin gastos de servicios. En muchos casos se enfrentan años de daño y abuso, inseguridad de dónde vivir y problemas de salud mental. Eso no fortalece a una comunidad, sino que la desgarra aún más. Las familias y comunidades de Khalif Browder, Leilín Polanco, Brandon Rodríguez, Elijah Mohammed, Eric Tavira, Andy Enríquez, Bradley Ballard, Joseph Echevarría, Karina Montes, nunca volverán a ser las mismas. And I'll say it in English real briefly for you. I'll switch it up. But once again, I'm so proud today of my colleagues, of Councilmember Aviles, our speaker, our public advocate, for showing up and uplifting these stories. These are not dramatizations. They are real. They really tear families apart. What is this administration trying to hide by making the PD be transparent and report on these stops? The truth that many of us that look like me and many of my colleagues already know is that a system that will more readily invest in the carceral system than housing, than food access, that mental health is a broken system, is a broken institution, and is breaking our communities apart. And for all of the names that I mentioned in my Spanish remarks, I once again recognize all of you as survivors, as advocates, and I vote aye on the override. Thank you.
Hanif.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
নির্জন কারাবাস হলো নির্যাতন। এটি ব্র্যান্ডন রড্রিগেজ, লেইলিন পলাঙ্কো, খলিফ ব্রাউডার এবং আরও নিউ ইয়র্কবাসীকে হত্যা করেছে। জনগণকে সঠিক তথ্য দেয়া এটা পুলিশের কাজ। ব্ল্যাক এবং ব্রাউন নিউ ইয়র্কবাসীদের অন্যায়ভাবে থামানোর এনওয়াইপিডির দীর্ঘ ইতিহাস। এই জন্য স্বচ্ছতা বৃদ্ধির প্রয়োজন। আমি একটি বৈচিত্র্যময় এবং প্রতিনিধিত্বকারী কাউন্সিলের সাথে দাঁড়াতে পেরে গর্বিত, যেটি ব্যাপকভাবে বিশ্বাস করে যে জেলে মানবিক পরিস্থিতি এবং নিরাপত্তার স্বার্থে পুলিশি জবাবদিহিমূলক ব্যবস্থা জননিরাপত্তার জন্য অপরিহার্য। I emphatically vote aye to override the mayor's misguided vetoes of both Intro 549 and Intro 586. I thank Speaker Adams, Public Advocate Williams, Criminal Justice Chair Nurse, Public Safety Chair Salam, and the Jails Action Coalition, CPR, all directly impacted New Yorkers for their clear and principled leadership on these critical bills. As co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, I'm proud that our membership has championed these bills as core priorities of our legislative agenda. Solitary confinement is torture. It causes people to physically and mentally deteriorate and exacerbates violence. The council must do more to end senseless deaths in our jails. Regarding Intro 586, the NYPD must provide the public with basic data on who it stops and why. Doing so is not a distraction from police work. It is police work. The NYPD's long history of disproportionately stopping Black and brown New Yorkers necessitates increased transparency. With these vetoes, Mayor Adams has shown that his regressive policy positions align with Republicans, COBA, and the PBA. The failure of his misinformation campaign shows that these positions do not align with the majority of New Yorkers. I am proud to stand with the diverse and representative council that overwhelmingly believes that humane conditions in jails and common sense police accountability measures are essential to public safety.
Hanks.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Depending on what district you represent, it will inform your feeling about what this bill means. For people who do not live in neighborhoods where there is an excess and a history of violence, the How Many Stops bill may seem counterproductive. Unfortunately, in neighborhoods like mine, the neighborhood I live in and raise my 4 children in, statistically, we will have more interactions with police, whether we are the bad actors or not. This reporting bill is aimed at aiding the hardworking families who endure both the violence in their communities and the enforcement measures applied by NYPD. While I endorse the spirit and the intent behind Intro 586A for its increased transparency, I do have concerns about the requirement to report on level 1 encounters. Attending the mayor's ride-along, it gave us a sneak peek into the complexities of how officers use level 1 encounters to garner important and time-sensitive information. And so as we move forward in passing Intro 586A, let's make sure as council members, as legislators, that we keep a close eye on the implementation, and should any challenges arise, that we work together for any amendments so we can continue to make this the best bill for all of New Yorkers. Having said that, I vote aye on all in support of this reporting bill for the benefit of the hardworking families in our community who again endure both the internal violence and NYPD's enforcement measures. And these are the folks that everyone here is standing by and voting for today. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Holden.
Permission to explain?
Permission granted.
I'm going to vote no on the override, and just going to go over a couple of things. First, we're asking fewer police officers to do a lot more. That makes no sense. That's no sense whatsoever. And the most mundane stops, we're asking them to report on. It's not even a stop, first of all, level 1. It's an encounter, and they're asking questions. Did you witness this? Did you see something? Did you see that person harass that person? That's what we're asking. So we want reports if the police officer stopped 10 people or at least questioned 10 people, asked them, did they witness something, and all 10 say no, they still have to report. That makes no sense whatsoever. That'll delay critical response. Stands to reason. If police are filling out, whether you want to call it paperwork or digital work, they're still going to have to answer questions, and on the level 1, up to 11 questions. And some could be complicated, like what happened? You have to describe what happened. So this, again, is going to tie the hands of the police officers, which is the intent here. This is the intent, to tie the officers' hands even further. Again, critical response, seconds count. You will see the critical response time go up, which will cost lives. You will see the response time in general go up. People will complain. Your constituents will complain. They don't care about mundane level 1 encounters. They care about critical response. So that's key here. And on the punitive seg, by the way, it's not called solitary confinement. We haven't had that in the city of New York for 10 years. But everybody says that, but nobody listens. If it's punitive seg, it's a reason. That's why the Federal Monitor disagrees with the body here, saying, you know what? We need it as a tool to keep our correction officers safe. So again, let's start looking at common sense bills, and really, we're shooting ourselves in the foot on the 586, because that will, again, cost lives, you'll see, in critical response.
Hudson.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you so much. If solitary confinement doesn't exist, then we should have no problem overriding the veto and setting it into law. Just one point. Another point I'd like to make is that NYPD data from 2022 shows that out of 15,102 recorded stops, almost 90% of all stops were Black and Latinx folks. Specifically, 59% were Black and 30% were Latinx. 65% of them resulted in no arrest and no summons, and that is exactly why we need the How Many Stops Act. The passage of this legislative package, and Intro 586 in particular, will bolster the civil liberties of New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and help cultivate a stronger relationship between the NYPD and our communities, one predicated on trust and integrity. This bill will provide the public and lawmakers alike with a complete and honest accounting of the way the police interact with our neighbors, helping us target and address the ugly vestiges of stop-and-frisk policing that are once again appearing in the communities we represent. I'm proud to be a part of this council, to have cast my vote for this historic package. It is an aye on both, and I look forward to ensuring that these laws are implemented and upheld faithfully. And I'd like to thank the Speaker, this body, and the families, the many, many families of the victims of police violence that have to share their stories over and over again. And to my council members, to my colleagues, to our one colleague, Councilmember Salam, who has himself experienced solitary confinement, to my colleagues who have family members who have experienced solitary confinement, thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you.
Joseph.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I am a council member from Brooklyn, also the chair and committee on education in the council. But more importantly, I am a mother of 4 Black young men. The real life experiences of everyday New Yorkers are why we are here today. And as a mom, dealt with my son being stopped by New York NYPD. My son was racially profiled and questioned. But what I know for certain is that my story is too familiar around the city. As an educator in our public school system for over 2 decades, I know the trauma of our youth face after horrific encounters with law enforcement does not go away. More than ever, transparency and accountability is needed, especially for young Black and brown New Yorkers who've been victims of racial profiling. The How Many Stop Act is about accountability and transparency. And if the Adams administration says they believe in that, the How Many Stop Act should not be an issue. Instead, Mayor Adams is simply misleading the public, but this council remained committed to honest dialogue about policies that can make us safer. When we have public safety data, it will make New Yorkers and their communities much safer. We owe it to New Yorkers, especially those who have been impacted by the most, to stand on the right and truthful side of history. The moment is now for us to deliver for New Yorkers who have been forgotten far too long. And this council remained firm in standing up for what is right. Today, I stand for my students and my 4 boys in Flatbush. So I vote aye on all.
Krishnan.
I vote aye. Thank you, Speaker Adams, for your leadership.
Lee.
I'm sorry, my Korean is not good enough, so I can't translate what I'm about to say into Korean, but kudos, shout out. Sorry, parents. I just wanted to say I vote aye on all and look forward to working with our colleagues on the council and the admin to ensure a very transparent implementation that will benefit all of our communities. Thank you.
Lewis.
Permission to explain my vote? Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. The How Many Stops Act went from being a bill about transparency and accountability to a public spectacle, about our lack or ability to lead, negotiate, and compromise on legislative matters to address existing public safety policies that impact Black and brown people, particularly men, our sons, cousins, uncles, fathers, guardians, and so on. Therefore, I'm not shocked by the pushback, because historically in this city, there's a notion that Black and brown men are better at being statistics and incarcerated. I am not shocked by the fear-mongering and fragmented information being shared with my Jewish constituents and AAPI constituents and communities in Flatbush and in Midwood, and the fragmented messaging in the press. It's clear that we have different opinions, and that's okay. But what concerns me is the fact that we are being asked to retain an existing system that lacks transparency. This is extremely problematic. NYPD is a necessary force. It is a group of practitioners to provide public safety services to New Yorkers. And our goal is not to deter them from being and doing their jobs. As we understand, NYPD response times are critical. That's why 586A provides an implementation process that can be designed to ensure NYPD personnel have the time to conduct every part of their job. That includes reporting. I want to acknowledge the mothers and family members that have lost loved ones to police violence in my district. Natasha Duncan, Carol Gray, who was the mother of Kamani Gray, and the family of Dwayne June. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership throughout this process. I know it was not easy, as well as you, Public Advocate, and Councilmember Hudson, Councilmember Aviles. I saw you on every news station. Thank you for your leadership. I look forward to the administration working with you, Madam Speaker, to ensure this is done the right way. I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Mamarato.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you.
While recognizing the importance of law enforcement transparency, today I will be casting my vote against overriding the mayor's veto of how many stop acts. While I value the intention behind the bill, my concern lie in operational challenges and the need to strike a balance between public disclosure and safeguarding sensitive information. We must work collaboratively to find solutions that address accountability without compromising the effectiveness of our police force. In casting my vote, I take into consideration the existing attrition within our police department and the strain it places on our officers. While the How Many Stop Acts aims to enhance transparency, we must also acknowledge the small increments in administrative tasks that can have cascading effects on our already stretched resources. In a time where we grapple with budget deficit, it's imperative to access the potential impact of operational efficiency and allocate resources judiciously to maintain both transparency and fiscal responsibility. Simultaneously, I commend the intentions behind the second bill, which seeks to implement reform and enhance due process in those in the Department of Corrections custody. But to completely abolish this provision that keeps both our officers and inmates safe is not a safe or responsible decision. I will also be voting to not override this veto, so I vote no on both.
Marte.
Aye.
Mealy.
Aye or no?
Menon.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I vote aye. I think it's imperative to ensure that with implementation of 586 that the council and the administration work collaboratively to engage on the best way to achieve the purposes of transparency and accountability and at the same time achieve public safety. I've heard from many of my constituents on this bill, and I strongly believe that there is a path forward to achieve the bill's objectives and at the same time keep communities safe. I firmly believe that these two ideas are in no way mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Moya.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Today's vote is not one that I take lightly. It is not often that the legislation that we pass in the council is vetoed by the mayor, and even more rare that it is that this body overrides that veto. It goes to the strong opinions and concerns that both sides hold for transparency and public safety expressed by elected officials and New Yorkers across the city. I will be voting in support of the override, but I hope that conversations continue over the next month before implementation to address the very real concerns over public safety. Thank you to Madam Speaker for your leadership on this, and thank you. I'll be voting in the affirmative.
Narcisse.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I'm so happy to be here with all my colleagues. Difficult time, difficult moment for us. When it comes to solitary confinement, this for a mother of four and being a registered nurse and work in reentry program, listening to the young folks in our community suffering. In my Creole language, like I'm hearing all the people talking, you do le abse apanande yo gen apese. Because when the abscess is on your butt, you can press on it. But if your family is suffering, dealing with what we're seeing in solitary confinement when you come out, it's difficult. It's difficile parce que ou gen mental, problème mental, tout si moun yo pa ka le ou sorti. You pas à l'école, you pas à fonctionner dans la communauté. So what I'm saying is just like you cannot function when you come back to your community. It's hard. So for those that said it's supposed to protect the officer, even the correctional officer said it themselves. Yo dit chaque jour que c'est difficile pour yo parce que les ap gade moun y ap fermé dans cage. Those are human beings. This is inhuman. Around the world, we should take information and process it. How the result come out when you rehabilitate folks when they go to jail. They're not supposed to come out not able to function. So, ma demande tout monde d'attendre moi pour yo dire que jodi a non camper pour yo. Deuxièmement, c'est un plaisir lié pour moi pour me travailler avec tout officier dans la communauté moi. I hold immense respect for the officers in my community. When that bill come, and I'm so happy that I had to process it because all the lies a come, tout menti, tout bagay ap dou ke ki jen pral difficile. No, that's not true at all. Because if you take time, you're a great officer. You take the oath to serve, to respect, to protect. So the little step that you have to take, now we're in technology era. So all the pressing, it's not taking extra. You go back to your precinct and you're able to process that. So for that, I'm saying merci en pile. Thank you very much for everyone. And my speaker, Madam Speaker, merci en pile. Merci, Jomani. You understand that
Please
part.
wrap up your
Merci en pile.
comments.
So in my vote, aye, and I'm going to vote aye for all those folks that's suffering.
Thank you, Councilmember Narcisse.
Nurse.
Why do I always have to go after Narcisse? First and foremost, I just want to also congratulate you, Majority Leader, on an excellent job today in facilitation. I want to thank Speaker Adams and Public Advocate Jumani Williams for leading the charge on these bills. I want to uplift the leadership of Councilmember Aviles and Hudson and the Council Central staff who did exceptional internal organizing work this week around these bills, and Councilmember Rivera and Hanks who moved these bills into passage last session. I am proud that my first vote as chair of the Criminal Justice Committee was to override an unnecessary mayoral veto, and I am proud to be part of this council today. A lot has been said about these transformational bills. I won't repeat everything, but I do want to take a moment to express my gratitude with those of you who stood by these bills and stood by each other as colleagues, despite the challenges of misinformation and, unfortunately, the lies that resulted in pressures placed upon you. I recognize and acknowledge that this was not easy for every member, and I am thankful for those of you today who are stepping up to do what is right. Thank you to every single New Yorker who shared their gut-wrenching stories, who fought back tears at rallies, who were vulnerable in public hearings, and who kept in the fight to pass these bills. A special shout out to the Jails Action Coalition, the Halt Solitary Coalition, and Communities United for Police Reform for your resolve and love for our people. And I'm really proud that we are ending solitary confinement today, and I'm looking forward to working to close Rikers tomorrow. I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Osei.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
我是黑人和中国人。作为一名纽约黑人，我小时候从无缘无故的被警察拦住。我们许多的黑人和棕色人种邻居都有类似的故事，因此我们需要这些数据来探解这个问题的根源，并解决它。I just wanted 对不起 to my Chinese siblings for my mispronunciation on anything, but I wanted to address any Mandarin-speaking communities who have been fed a lot of misinformation about what this bill does. As a black New Yorker, I remember taking the subway to school and being stopped by police. You know, first of all, let me give you a picture. I was a gay, nerdy black kid. It was no threat to anyone, but the sole threat that these police officers saw was the color of my skin. And I know that's not an isolated incident for young black men, for black people, not only within New York, but across the country. And this bill that we're passing today is going to set the record on what black families have been teaching and asking for when it comes to their relationship with the police. And that's a level of accountability, of transparency, and safety. The numbers don't lie. We see that our communities are most impacted and policed based off of the color of our skin. So I want to thank all of the bill sponsors, the public advocate, the speaker, for really keeping me safe, for keeping my colleagues in the city council safe, as well as all black New Yorkers, especially young black men who have been targeted without any levels of accountability. So thank you. I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Palladino.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
This is a very sad, sad day. It's a sad day because it's no longer about the issue of 586 and 549. What it's become is a racial issue. It's really terrible. We're talking here about division. It's constant division. Division is not what's going to bring us together. I sit here as a 69-year-old white woman. My mother worked in a factory making buttonholes. She watched her son at 15 years old get arrested for stealing a car. He was then sentenced upstate New York. At 16, we were told he went away to college. My brother was then arrested again because he was a drug addict. And he was in Rikers Island for 3 years. He got out in 1974. He served in solitary confinement. I don't wear anything on my sleeve because I have dignity and I have respect for my mother and what we come from. Please don't make this a racial issue. It's not. I'm sorry you feel that. I hear you in the background, and that's okay. But I just want you to know,
Sorry,
raising
Councilmember
children.
Palladino, as I mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, the public shall remain silent. There will be no interruptions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, when I raised 2 children, they're grown men today. I gave, not my 46-year-old, but my 36-year-old, the same lecture you've given yours. Be careful when a cop pulls you over. Make sure 2 hands are on the wheel. See, he could be profiled also. He likes tattoos. He likes earrings. He's a little different than his older brother. And I too told him, be very careful when they go over to your trunk. They may drop something in your trunk and you don't know it. So it's not like I'm blind in any way, shape, or form to that fact that there's good and there's bad. I never judge a person by their color. I never judge a person by their religion.
Councilmember, please wrap up your point and cast your vote.
And then I just want to say, in saying all of what I just said, the reason behind my vote is because I understand the importance today more than ever. I don't like profiling, but there is a certain amount of things that are happening here today that doesn't involve transparency at all. It's just about color.
Councilmember,
and please, it
cast your
should
vote.
not be. So I vote no. I want this veto to stick. Thank you very much, everybody.
Powers.
I vote aye. I'll let others speak on that. Thank you.
Wrestler.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. I'd firstly like to be associated with the remarks of our speaker and our public advocate. Thank you both for your moral clarity and leadership and courage. The people of New York City are indebted to each of you and to the extraordinary campaigns that have fought over many years during many mayoralities and many speakerships to get us to the point today when we are overriding the vetoes of Mayor Adams. I have been deeply disturbed by his misinformation campaign. And I am deeply disturbed by some of the comments that I've heard on the floor today. I have news that I'd like to share. Racism exists. While less than 50% of the people in New York City are black or Latino, 97% of the people who face level 1 stops are black and Latino. About 90% of the people on Rikers Island are black and Latino. This is urgent. This is necessary. The reforms that we are putting into law today will bring greater oversight and accountability to the NYPD, and it will end torture in our jails. I am proud, deeply proud, to vote aye.
Riley.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
I gotta get up for this one. So, I gotta apologize to my staff who prepared remarkable remarks for me today, but I always get inspired when I'm in here from hearing messages on the floor. So I'm just gonna say this really clear. We didn't make this a race thing. This is a race thing. This is what we have to deal with on a daily basis. And I'm speaking to you as a black man who still has to deal with this on a daily basis. We didn't make this a race thing. Earlier today, Councilmember Banks, Osei, Salam, and myself put out an op-ed where we explained why we're gonna support this overriding veto today. But what you did not hear is our personal experiences that we have to deal with on a daily basis. You see, my mother, too, had to witness her son getting thrown into a holding cell. But guess what? I just graduated from college. I was just looking for parking for work. And I got pulled over and got thrown into a holding cell just because I was black on the Upper West Side, looking for parking because they thought I was casing houses. This is something that we deal with on a daily basis. So when y'all say this is not a racial thing, have y'all ever stepped in our shoes? I feel like I'm a reasonable person. I try to talk to everyone in this council here today. But when we see them red and blue lights behind us, our hearts drop to our stomachs. This is reality. This is something we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, to the mayor, that's my brother right there, a black man. I'm never going to be here to tear him down, but we have to make sure that we're working to improve our districts. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Titles and roles, we're going to lose this. We ain't never going to lose our blackness, ever. So if we're going to actually address the transparency and accountability that's happened with the injustices in the criminal justice system, with solitary confinement, when you're bringing black people back in the community worse than when they went in, when you're treating them like animals but calling them animals when they're doing animal things in our communities, this is why we want to address it. So I proudly vote aye to override this veto, and thank you to all my colleagues, especially those from the BLAC that advocated for this. Thank you so much.
Rivera.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Very proud to be a member of this body today. I'd like to commend Speaker Adams for her steadfast commitment for defending the passage of these historic and important public safety bills. I got to thank Public Advocate Williams, of course, my colleagues for their clarifying points and personal stories. And of course, all the groups, Communities United for Police Reform, Jails Action Coalition, Freedom Agenda, Halt Solitary, and there are many, many others who came here and wore their heart on their sleeve and shared real harrowing stories of what they faced. And I just want to highlight that this council values our partners in the NYPD and in correction and understand the role they play in our streets and institutions. However, today we're confronting the reality that our over-reliance on policing and incarceration to keep communities safe is counterproductive. And though comments today, they've been both to empathize and antagonize, this council as a body has approached this exercise now twice with facts and with a coalition of advocates, experts, and impacted people in the room at all times. This council takes our holistic approach to these issues very thoughtfully. We've heightened investments in community-based solutions to ensure true public safety. Over my time here, and so acutely seen as Chair of Criminal Justice the past 2 years, it's clear we have to couple funding for evidence-based programming with legislative measures to comprehensively implement reform. That's our duty and that is our obligation. So while these vetoes are not surprising amidst a misinformation campaign, what's shocking is how we've heard from so many very few facts to make their point. The New York Times reported that the NYPD's anti-crime units are still stopping, frisking, and searching too many people unlawfully, almost all of them people of color. A quarter of those stops found unconstitutional by a federal monitor. And again, because it bears repeating, almost all people Black and Latino. And with solitary, I'll just say it's archaic, it's a practice that should no longer exist, it leads to recidivism and even death. It's time to build a better, safer, more equitable city, and I proudly vote aye.
Salam. Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Today, I do not plan to step down, but rather to step up. I vote aye because today, the New York City Council is fighting for the implementation of 2 bills that would bring generational change in our criminal justice system. Firstly, Intro 586A, also known as the How Many Stops Acts. Detractors of this bill would tell you that it would create a rift between our police and the communities they serve by discouraging casual conversations. According to the Patrol Guide published by NYPD, and language in this current bill, casual conversations that build trust are encouraged. Your hellos and goodbyes and requests for directions are all the very casual conversations that build trust. The bill language very clearly states these sort of conversations have no need for reporting. Only investigative conversations tied to the possibility of crime are required to be reported. If these laws were in place in 1989, I vote aye.
Salamanca.
Aye or no?
Sanchez.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
La señora Jean en mi comunidad lo dijo bien. Nuestra comunidad quiere que se respeten nuestros derechos humanos y constitucionales y queremos la seguridad. Merecemos ambos. Y al afirmar las introducciones 586 y 549, tomamos un paso a lograrlo. Crecí en el Bronx durante un punto más alto de las detenciones policiales en la ciudad de Nueva York. Cada familiar masculino en mi vida había sido detenido por la policía al menos una vez, incluso en mi presencia. Experiencias traumáticas. Hay familias en mi distrito cuyas relaciones con la policía de Nueva York se ven irreemplazablemente dañadas por el trauma de paradas inconstitucionales, por el vacío de un miembro de la familia que nunca regresará, como la familia de Anthony Baez y Alan Feliz, quienes han abogado tan fuertemente por estas leyes. Hay también vecinos que se han unido a la fuerza policial, antiguos compañeros míos, escolares y familiares que ahora componen el creciente liderazgo de la fuerza, llamados a servir porque en verdad creen que la policía puede hacer mejor. De hecho, los dominicanos encabezan el grupo de identidad más rápido creciendo dentro de la fuerza de la policía de Nueva York. Como concejal, yo represento a todas estas perspectivas y al final todos queremos lo mismo: la transparencia y la confianza, la mejoría de la relación entre la comunidad y los policías. La única manera de lograrlo es con recuento completo. ¿Cuántas detenciones? ¿Quién fue detenido? ¿Por qué? ¿Y fue constitucional? Por todo esto, voto sí en todo. I vote aye on all because my community and all New Yorkers deserve public servants who strive for better.
Schulman.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Before I say what I want to thank my colleagues who shared their personal experiences today. I know it wasn't easy, and it was and I'm sure it was difficult, so I want to thank you. The first tenet of government is to make people feel safe, and I've always been a proponent of public safety and supportive of the NYPD, especially around strengthening community policing. I also understand the need for accountability and transparency and want to acknowledge the Speaker for her fierce advocacy around this. Intro 586 will not take effect until later this year, and I believe there is an opportunity for the administration and council to work together on the implementation to ensure that the important transparency that is being sought occurs without public safety being impeded. This past weekend, I joined other council colleagues in a ride-along with the NYPD and learned that separate from Intro 586, police officers are inundated with other paperwork, as was mentioned by my colleague, Councilmember Dinowitz, that all of us should be looking to address on how to digitize so our officers spend more time on the streets keeping us safe. And I want to say that Some of that is internal to the NYPD, but a lot of it is cross systems. The officers I spoke to said that sometimes their systems don't link up with the DA's offices, and that's something that has to be fixed, and I am making a commitment to work with people to do that, and with that, I vote aye on all.
Stevens.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Well, the beautiful thing is when your name starts with S, you have all your colleagues who say a lot of the things that already needed to be said. So I do want to be associated with the remarks of my good friend and colleague, Kevin Riley, who, as people were saying their remarks, really got emotional because the things that are being said sometimes hits home. Like myself, I want to reiterate, racism does exist. We can pretend that it doesn't, but it's easier when it's not you who are being victimized. It's easy to say those things when your community isn't the one that's been being brutalized and victimized and continuously having to see the struggles. So today, I'm happy to vote aye on all of these bills because it is not going to fix any of the things that we had to endure and probably won't fix a lot of the things moving forward, but it is sending a signal that we as a council hear those struggles that often don't get heard. We hear the people who often are not the ones that we are legislating for. It sends a signal that we understand our communities. It sends a signal to the police department that this is not against you, or to the corrections, this is not against you. This is about making sure everyone is safe. It's about making sure that we all feel safe. And transparency and accountability is part of that. And I'm really concerned that they're going so hard to not have transparency. That's what we should be thinking about. Why is it that they don't want these numbers recorded? Because the reality is, if after the stop and frisk, and they weren't underreporting level 3s, we wouldn't need to go down to 1. So I vote aye on all.
Ung.
I vote aye on all.
Vernikov.
No on all.
Williams.
I vote aye on all.
Juan.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I just want to give a great big thanks to my colleagues, the Majority Leader, Speaker Adams, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, all the co-sponsors, and for those who just spoke in favor of the override. For the members of the press that are here, there couldn't be a starker contrast in what has been spoken in this room or in the press by the mayor. As a lawmaker, we are called here to legislate on behalf of people, of constituents. And my constituents are people who live in Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood houses, Woodside houses, where the facts show that level 1 stops disproportionately target our Black and Latino neighbors. 97% of the stops made by the mayor's new NYPD unit were of Black and brown New Yorkers in 2022. It is clear here who came here to make laws for people and who came here to make laws and convenience of the NYPD. We are not here to make your lives easier as NYPD officers or any government agent. We are here to make the lives safer and easier for the people we represent, especially our Black and brown neighbors, and especially our siblings who are sitting here in this very room with fathers who have been incarcerated, with brothers who have been incarcerated, especially our Black and brown brothers. And as an AAPI woman, as an immigrant, as a mother, I will never, ever allow my lighter skin and the shape of my eyes and the co-opting of the model minority myth to weaponize AAPIs against my Black and brown neighbors. It is not acceptable, and we are going to continue to stand here in solidarity, and I'm proud to vote aye, both to make sure that we end solitary confinement, as well as How Many Stops Act, so that we have transparency and accountability, because I did not come here to make NYPD officers' lives easier. I came here to keep them accountable. Thank you.
Yeager.
No.
Zhuang.
No, but I want to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
I want to thank you, my coworkers here, work on this bill, but for my district, I have been knocked thousands of doors last year. The first priority in my district is the public safety. In my district, people want to support police officers. In my district, 1 of 3 people have been experienced And as an Asian, I have been experiencing hate crime in my district also. When we talk about lives we lost, we forget to talk about the lives we lost as a police officer. In 2024, December 20th, we lost 2 fathers, 2 brothers, Detective Wen Jianlu, who is an Asian, Detective Ramos, who is a Latino. Their life also lost line of duty. No one ever mentioned that. When I have been helped their families ever since, I know how much they went through in their life. No one gave them a chance to fill out their paperwork. Rather than require more paperwork, we should focus on increasing NYPD's budget to hire more police officers, which is a call to action supported by the overwhelming majority of my constituents. Therefore, I'm supporting of the mayor's veto. And also, I want to say that in Chinese. 我作为第一个布鲁克林的华人议员，我要对我的社区负责。我的社区支持警察，我们的首要任务是要给警察更多的资源去做他的工作，而不是把他的手捆绑起来不能工作。我们需要他们的支持，他们的保护，把我们社区的安全搞成第一位。作为2个孩子的母亲，我觉得社会安全是我们最重要的任务。所以谢谢大家，我会投反对票。Thank you.
Morelli.
I vote no.
Farias.
The How Many Stops Act does not get in the way of police work, nor it is a hindrance to our safety. Rather, it is an essential part of keeping our communities safe for years to come. I hear consistently from New Yorkers in my district and across all 5 boroughs on how they want good police officers as well as strenuous and objective oversight. I, along with the majority of my colleagues, truly believe this bill satisfies both of those requirements. This is why I will be voting yes today. And in español. La ley de cuentas paradas no interfiere con el trabajo policial ni es un obstáculo para nuestra seguridad, sino que es una parte esencial para mantener seguras a nuestras comunidades en los años venideros. Constantemente escucho a los vecinos de mi distrito y de los 5 condados decir que quieren buenas agentes de policía, así como una supervisión rigurosa y objetiva. Yo, junto con la mayoría de mis colegas, realmente creemos que este proyecto de la ley satisface ambos requisitos. I vote aye on all.
Speaker Adams.
I vote aye.
All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote of 42 in the affirmative, 9 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. So the ayes do have it this time. Introduction and reading of bills.
None.
Thank you. There are no resolutions on today's calendar, so we will now move into general discussion. And I'm calling on my colleague, Councilmember Powers.
Thank you. I know it's been a long day, so I will keep it brief. I just did want to say a few words about my former colleague and a very good friend of mine, Paul Vallone, who we lost this Sunday. For those who served with him, he was an extraordinary guy, a great colleague, and somebody who I think is a great model for a lot of us as we do this job, very difficult job every day. I've known Paul even before I got the chance to serve with him, and I've known his family for years. I know the Speaker and others also had the privilege to serve with him, and the loss of him is a loss to the city. Obviously, he was serving this city as a job in the Department of Veteran Affairs, but is a person that I think many of us could look to for a good laugh, for a great colleague, and somebody who really cared deeply about this city and his district, and of course goes back all the way to his father and the service, and actually his grandfather and the service they provided to the city. So he was a gem of a human being. I keep using that term because it's really true, and it's the one thing that I really think encapsulates Paul. And I just want to send my condolences out to his entire family, the Vallones and the Constantinopoulos, and everyone that had the opportunity, the special opportunity to get to know Paul. He'll be deeply, deeply missed. And I hope all of us can carry a little bit of his spirit into this job every single day. So we'll miss you, Paul. Thanks.
I now call on Public Advocate Jumani Williams.
Thank you so much. By the way, I don't know if I'm the only one surprised that Councilmember Osei speaks Mandarin. That really blew me away. Everybody seemed like they were just cool with it, but that was pretty dope. Congratulations to everyone. I did want to just say to some of my colleagues I heard speak today, and particularly colleagues who have less melanin in their skin and describe their individual experiences, I don't and cannot take away from those individual experiences. I believe them to be real. But what I need folks to stop doing is trying to use individual experiences to try to take away community effect from other people. I really need you to stop doing that and to understand the impact that many of these policies we are trying to undo have on Black and brown communities. Those community impacts are just as real, and understand that what you are describing is such, the impact of us having the same experience is multiplied. I need you to understand that because of being Black and brown, it is just true. From solitary to stops to a Black woman giving birth, it is just a true statement. So please understand that. And yes, our communities often ask for additional law enforcement to feel safe. One, they ask for many other things that nobody seems to hear, like housing, like better food, like better just nurses in the school. They ask for a lot of things that we seem not to hear. But the trauma of being Black in America means that when they ask for those things, they also ask for their nephews and sons and folks that they know to not be stopped incessantly, to not be treated unfairly. All of those things we hold, and all of those things we are trying to address, and they are complex. But when we are trying to address them, please do not pretend somehow we don't understand what our own constituents and all our families are asking us. We very much do, and it's difficult. So please believe us when we explain who we are, what we're going through, and our experiences. And last, I just want to associate myself with Councilman Powers in the words of, he spoke about Councilman Paul Vallone. He may have voted against us, but he would have done it with an awesome smile, and I'm going to miss that smile. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Mealy?
Yes, I too want to send my condolences to the Paul Vallone family, and he served with me also, and that's one thing our public advocate said. He would do it, but he have a beautiful smile. And that's what I'm going to take back always from him. And I want to also, one of my mentors, Howard Golden, an American lawyer and a politician in the Democratic Party of Brooklyn, who has served as the borough president of the 16th borough president of Brooklyn and was the chair of the Democratic Party in Brooklyn. And I must say, Honorable Howard Golden always served, and he served on the New York City Council just as well. So we have to honor him. And I want to just let you know that was a mentor to me when he gave me a proclamation. Right after he gave me the proclamation, I asked for funding. And that was the first funding I got in the city. And that helped my basketball team, that helped my community gardening. So I hope we continue being servants like that to give, to make sure that we could keep our young people safe and off the streets. And my condolences to both of these families, and congratulations, Speaker and this body, of passing this legislation. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in line to speak, I'll now call on Speaker Adrian Adams to close today's stated meeting.
Thank you, Majority Leader. The 1:30 p.m. stated meeting of January 30th, 2024 is hereby adjourned. Thank you, colleagues.